Hi everybody, welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to look at this ice cream from Crosta and Malika. I think I've said that right. And we're going to recreate it ourselves at home. If you want to see how we do it, stick around and we'll show you. We went to our local supermarket, which unfortunately happens to be a Waitrose here in the UK, and you know, there's a very specific type of person that can afford to use Waitrose supermarkets. That is not us, by the way. Walked past the ice cream aisle, as I always do, just to see if there's anything new in there. Although this isn't new, I had never eaten this, so I thought we'd buy some, and the other night we sat down. It's like £6.50 for this little tub. You know, what does that equate to? $12, $11? Something like that, 14 Canadian dollars. It's a lot of money. We sat down the other night, we watched a random film, and we started digging into this, and it was actually really nice. There's a couple of things to note. It doesn't freeze hard. It's straight out the freezer and it's surprisingly soft, and that is for one reason only. It is 20% sugar. So obviously something to remember, this is gelato. So gelato is lower fat and higher sugar than American ice cream or standard ice creams. Although some people like to argue gelato just means ice cream. Yes, it does. It's the Italian word for ice cream, but they are very different products. Gelato and ice cream. I've done a whole video on the differences. I'll put a link in the description below. Check it out. I go through what the notable differences are between the two. But when we look down on the ingredients here, it's got glucose syrup, it's got normal sugar in it, it's got the Amarena cherry sauce, which is made up of sugar and glucose syrup itself. There's just sugar coming out of everywhere. Like I said, it's 20% sugar content, 6% fat, so really quite low in fat. Probably as low as you can go, fat content for gelato before it becomes almost sherbet. It's quite tasty. It is quite tasty. You know, we've munched our way through, you know, most of the tub. Something to note, now obviously this is a mascarpone Amarena cherry gelato. So it's a mascarpone base with the cherry kind of swirl. Ripple, let's use an old-fashioned term, a cherry ripple. The cherry is very forward, but it's very sweet. The cherry ripple is very, very sweet. It's got a little bit of iciness to it, but that's kind of to be expected, but it's very sweet. It's too sweet considering how sweet the base is. But we can change that. So that's what we're going to do today. We're going to remake this at home and just adjust some of the sweetness so that it's a bit more in tune with what I would like to eat, what my wife would like to eat. If you want to go full sugar, if you want to go full on Captain Diabetes, then find these cherries, Amarena cherries, add shitloads of sugar to it while you're processing them, and then follow the recipe that way. But we're going to use Morello cherry base. No, we're going to use Morello cherry swirl. Let's just get stuck into it, shall we? Now for this recipe, what we did was we took our Morello cherry compote. This is straight off the shelf from a supermarket. The Morello cherries are a little bit more sour than the Amarena cherries, so it goes really well with the base. We're going to empty the jar into the pan and start warming it up when we're going to add in some liquid glucose. This will drop the freezing point and also sweeten it somewhat, but not as much as table sugar would. Once that's all nicely combined and warmed and emulsified together, you're going to take it off the heat and strain it through a sieve so that you're left with your liquid element only. You don't want any of the cherry flesh left. Once it's in a container, just put it aside and we'll use it a bit later on. For the gelato base, we're going to start with the milk as we always do and add in our sugars along with our milk powder and a stabilizer. Now gelato uses a lot more stabilizer than American ice cream because of the low fat content. And as you can see here, I'm running the gauntlet with the pan. I should have used a bigger pan, but hey, we'll try and get through. Once it comes up to the temperature that your stabilizer needs, that is likely between 60 and 70 degrees centigrade, you're gonna add in your mascarpone cheese. Yeah, there's not a lot of room left here. One swift fart and I'm gonna go over the edge. So you know, bear with me. I think we might just make it. Once it's all combined, we're going to take it off the heat and pop it in a container and then stick it in a fridge overnight to chill down. Once the base is completely chilled down, that's probably overnight or, you know, a good 4 or 5 hours later, take it out of the fridge, give it a nice quick stir to loosen it all back up again. Sometimes the mascarpone will settle one way or another, but just mix it all back together, it will all re-emulsify. Pop it in your ice cream machine and churn away. There's a lot of sugar in this, like I said, so it will take a bit longer. In my machine, it took 18 minutes to churn this batch because it's quite a large batch. Once it's ready, you can start loading up your tub by layering in nice spoonfuls of your cherry sauce, and then follow that with more of your ice cream base until your tub's completely full, when you're then going to pop it in the freezer to completely harden off. Ice cream is out the freezer it kind of goes hard, but I've adjusted the sugar to suit. Your freezer might be different, you know, 20% sugar, it's still going to go hard in a home freezer, that's just the way they are. Morello cherries, I'm looking forward to seeing how these two have combined. So let's dish them up and see what it tastes like. Scooped really well, scooped just like gelato does. It's kind of, you need to play the game with the stabilizers carefully with gelato. If you don't use stabilizers in gelato, you're going to struggle to keep it in the freezer for any more than a couple of days. It just won't work. It will turn to ice really quickly. The lack of fat plays havoc with the freezing schedule, so all gelato that you buy in the shops is stabilized. Do it at home if you're doing this because it will really help. Let's try some and see what it tastes like. So for me personally, this is a much more balanced ice cream. It's not as sweet because you don't have that extreme sweetness coming from the cherry sauce. And you go too sweet with things like that, with fruit sauces or swirls, they start to taste artificial, and that's actually what happened with the store-bought one. It started to taste like an artificial cherry sauce. They do state that they use, you know, cherry reduction and stuff like that in there, so I'm not exactly sure what's gone into making that sauce, but here you can control it. I've used a store-bought Morello Cherry Compote, which is find the ingredients. It is pretty simple on here. It's Morello cherries, a small amount of sugar, water, and then some starches to thicken it up with a bit of vanilla extract, likely to boost the flavour. But it really complements the mascarpone base, and that's really important because you need the add-ins to complement the base, not just a wave of sugar. Like I said in the video earlier on, you had a 20% sugar content across this whole base from the store-bought one, and that can be too high for a lot of people. And when you've got that extreme sweetness of the cherry sauce coming through, it's a bit off-putting. But again, you can control that. You can use different cherries. If you want to add the cherry flesh into the ice cream, you absolutely can. You're free to do whatever you kind of want to do. I would say that if you're going to keep the flesh in there, I'd probably start adding a little bit of sucrose or table sugar to the recipe, because the glucose, whilst it does help with the freezing point, it will not affect the cherry pieces quite as well as sucrose will. So you might want to play around with those numbers, but nice, smooth, creamy mascarpone base with a semi-sweet, semi-tart cherry sauce going through. Definitely worth trying. You can support the channel on Ko-fi. I'll put a link on the screen and down below, so head on over and help us keep this channel going. Thanks very much for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and we'll see you next time.